You know, old saying is, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? If a tree falls in the woods, the real question is it coming back in native species? All right, so we got a lot of snow last night, and today we're gonna walk through some really high quality habitat to see what wildlife are feeding on, especially birds. You know, in conditions like this where snow just blankets the ground, covers up a lot of their food sources, you see a lot of people have their bird feeders out this time of year, and that's great, but this is what birds and other species of wildlife would be feeding on naturally in the wild. So let's go check it out. So first I want to show the contrast between poor wildlife habitat. We're talking mowed lawns, mowed pastures, overgrazed pastures, places that are just, you know, bare and not very tall vegetation. It gets completely covered up by snow. This is what good habitat looks like. All right, so this is good habitat. We've got lots of different species here. We've got different goldenrods and bonesets that still have their seeds on their seed heads. We've got false sunflower. We've got rudbeckias right here. We've got Joe Pye weed, a lot of really tall forbs that produce a lot of seeds. And if we weren't down here talking right now, there'd be a lot of birds in here feeding on this stuff. So this is a buttonbush shrub. Some people call this buckbrush. It grows in a lot of aquatic areas, wetlands, and it's a really great food source for waterfowl. But it's also, as you see here, on a little bit drier ground, and birds have been feeding on it. So it's still holding onto its seed head, and another really great food source in the wintertime. This is Carolina rose. We actually just jumped a cottontail out of here as we were walking up to it. But as you can see, it still has a lot of rose hips on it. These rose hips are not only edible by wildlife, but they're edible by humans as well. And this is an excellent food source on days like today. This is a species of rosin weed. As you can see, most of these seeds have already been eaten off of this one. This is a highly desirable food for wintertime, and the birds have already been utilizing it. All of this Rudbeckia right here, this is actually Rudbeckia palustris, which is a really rare species. But, you know, this acts the same as any other Rudbeckia. But it's also called black-eyed Susan, that's the common name. And you can see just tons and tons of seed heads in here right now. And that's because there's tons and tons of it on this property. And so there's always an abundance of this here that, that wildlife are feeding on. And really great one for wintertime food and cover, as you can see. Now, I mean, we're looking at probably a group of 20 songbirds, different species, and there's probably not 20 songbirds in the entire 20-acre field next to us that's completely mowed. So in this little, you know, 1-2 acre opening of native grasses and really great habitat, we have a ton of songbirds. I mean, that's ridiculous. So when it snows like this and the snow piles up for long amounts of time, ground-dwelling birds, mammals, things like that will burrow up underneath this snow to, you know, protect themselves from the elements. Well, gama grass creates this umbrella-like effect that allows wildlife to get up underneath its leaves. Even when it's not snowing, it does that, and that's it creates a great place for wildlife to hide from predators, to stay out of the elements. And this is a great example right here. You see, it creates like a little cave up underneath this entire circular mound of gama grass. Wildlife can get up underneath this and stay protected from the elements and stay protected from predators. And I think that's really cool. You lose this when you mow these ecosystems, these grassland ecosystems. When you mow them down to nothing, you lose these important functions. And these are things we don't think about grasslands providing for wildlife, but it's really important. You can see how an area like this behind me doesn't provide any of those things for wildlife. So they have no shelter, they have no food, they have no protection from predators, they have nowhere to raise their young, and we have 40 million acres of this in North America. It's our largest crop, is turf grass, mowed fields. If we mow everything, we are going to lose everything. If we want wildlife, we have to keep wild places. And you could do that in your own yard. And I'll show you what I'm doing in my front yard. So I don't know if you can see that, but there's a ton of seeds on the ground right now where birds have been coming in here, eating the seed heads of these gray-headed coneflowers. And this is in my front yard. This used to be turf grass that I've converted back to native prairie. And man, it provides a ton of food for wildlife. I mean, look at that. That is a ton. I mean, thousands and thousands of seeds on the ground and still a ton left on these plants. And the birds are in here just eating them like crazy. All right, another great one out here in my landscape, and this is rattlesnake master, and you can tell birds have been eating on it. Lots of seeds left on it still, and this is probably one of my top 3, if not my favorite native wildflower, and just a ton of food right here in an area that's probably 20 foot by 60 foot. We have a huge buffet of food for wildlife. And wildlife also come here to take shelter in the summertime. We jump a lot of rabbits out of here. And so you can do this in your front yard. This is a very small portion of my front yard that I've turned back to native habitat, and it's made a huge difference. I've noticed the difference. So yeah, this is what good wildlife habitat is supposed to look like in the wintertime. As you can see from me standing up there, even with all this white, we still have a lot of cover in here. And that's what you want. You want to provide this cover with all these native grasses and forbs and wildflowers, sedges, and you also want to provide the food. That's the most important part, having lots of food for wildlife. You don't get this in a mowed lawn or a mowed field. You're chopping down all those seed heads, and those seed heads are what's keeping these species of wildlife thriving throughout the winter, especially in northern states where they get a lot of snow. Down here, the snow will be gone in a couple days, but it's still important to have lots of food here throughout the winter time.
Ew, I'm getting touched with nasty fish.
There you go.
Is he alive?
Yeah,
Yep.
he's just cold. All right. So yeah, even with all this white, we still have cover and food for wildlife. If you're like me, wait, all right, I got that. Let me start over, sorry.